Thank you for staying with us. If you're just joining us, you only missed the introductory part of the show. Now, we are ready to sink our phalanges, like they say in biology, into the meat of today's show. Now, Nigeria's Supreme Court has temporarily suspended February 10th deadline to stop using the old banknotes, which had caused the cash crisis in the entire country. Now, amidst the ongoing frustration and agitation by the bank customers over the struggles to withdraw cash from their respective bank accounts, most Nigerians had to turn to point of sale, popularly known as POS operators, to get cash, which comes with excessively high rates. But the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, has warned the POS agents over exorbitant charges. And News Central's correspondent Adeleru-Balogun had visited some of the POS centers and operators in Lagos State, southwest Nigeria, to help us understand the current situation in the country. And this is her report.
It's barely 2 days before the deadline issued by the Central Bank of Nigeria to end the legal tender statuses of old 200 Naira note, 500 Naira and 1000 Naira banknote. Although this has been restrained following a recent ruling by the Supreme Court of Nigeria, the Naira redesign has come with so much discomfort for bank customers who are forced to queue many hours to withdraw their cash from the automated teller machines amidst exorbitant charges by point-of-sale operators. For context, POS agents charge between 1,000 Naira, 1,500 Naira and 2,000 Naira for every 5,000 Naira and 10,000 Naira withdrawn by customers and 300 Naira for 1,000 Naira. POS operators, we've seen that they have been on the lips of many Nigerians because of the exorbitant charges that they have put on the prices of transactions. We've been speaking with them, and they said that it's been quite difficult for them to also get cash, to also meet up with the demands of their customers now.
We've been going to bank, of which we end up being given like 5,000, if it's not 5,000, 2,000, of which is not always enough. So most times what we do is we end up going to people who sells food stuff and other things. So when they are done with sales for the day, we end up collecting cash from them. If you want to withdraw 20k now, you won't get it because there's no cash anywhere.
It's very difficult. Because no customer they come in to be rushing us that they need money, they need money. Even though we are doing the business, sometimes we go to bank to get money sometimes it's very hard. And sometimes like that. Sometimes we get to the bank, sometimes the bank will give us 5,000 a day.
Nigeria is a cash-dependent informal economy, and the recent policy has frustrated businesses, payments, and other services of the economy. Viral videos show bank customers invading banking halls, attacking bankers, forcing their way into the banks against all security protocols as they struggle to get cash.
They paid my salary on Saturday. Up till now, I can't get access to my money. My son is crying. My family are crying. There is no money to feed them. I came outside to play for Bajabu so that if I can able to get something and to help my family. Nothing.
The Central Bank of Nigeria on Tuesday issued a stern warning to POS operators over exorbitant charges, adding that the approved rate for every 5,000 Naira is 100 Naira. The Apex Bank also warned that it would withdraw the operating licenses of point-of-sale agents found guilty of inflating charges above the CBN rate in Nigeria. Adeleru-Balogun reporting for News Central.
Well, there you have it. It's been an unbearable situation for Nigerians, especially those who are dependent on cash. And a lot of people have been speculating with different opinions. And some people have called on the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, to actually declare the amount of money that is in circulation, because a lot of people need to know at this point. And like I said, there's been speculations here and there, and we need to find out what exactly is going on. So joining us to discuss this today are two of our powerful in-house strong forces. And by that, I mean News Central's head of news, Uzonna Ononye, and of course, News Central's head of programs, Tolulope, Adeleru-Balogun. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you very much.
A pleasure. Now, first of all, let's talk about the protests that have been ongoing. We've seen protests in Ibadan, in Abeokuta, in Uyo, and other states of the country as a result of the cash scarcity. And this has been the people's response to all that is happening at the moment. Now, I'll throw my first question to Tolu. Do you think that this is the best way Nigerians can react to the situation? I mean, we've seen in time past where something comes up and before you know, a protest erupts, and the protest leads to a further, destruction as it seems. So do you think that this is the best way Nigerians should handle the situation?
So really the answer to that is that no, because at the end of the day, whether it's public infrastructure or it's private infrastructure, it's being destroyed, and that's infrastructure that will need to be replaced in one way or the other. Those are banks that are going to have to spend money to fix whatever it is has been broken, ATMs will need to be replaced and things like that. But I think it really goes beyond just asking if that's the best response, because at the end of the day, it feels like a situation where Nigerians and particularly bank customers were pushed into a corner because there was a lack of communication, there was a lack of sort of understanding in terms of who needs to be where, when money will come out. You're not communicating how much money has really been put out in the banks. The banks themselves are also not communicating in terms of how much money they have and how much money they'll be putting out. So no, it's not the best way to handle it, but let's also be understanding of how this crisis just over the weekend, last weekend, really just spiraled into something beyond anybody's imagination. And there continues to be, in some aspects, places around the country where you're seeing these small levels and eruptions of this situation. Well, metropolitan areas like Lagos and Abuja, possibly some Port Harcourt as well, but we also don't want it to spread. So not the answer to we have to understand frustrations that many Nigerians are feeling right now, because this is affecting their businesses, their personal lives, it's affecting their ability to even get healthcare in some instances, or even get money for even taking care of something like school fees or daily fees. That frustration, unfortunately, has bubbled to the surface in many instances. And don't forget that this comes at a time when many parts of the country were still experiencing those costs. So just one extra thing, almost like that feather that broke the proverbial camel's back, unfortunately.
Tolu, we seem to be having some issue with your audio. We will come back to you in a short while. But I'll throw this next one to Uzonna. Uzonna, now Nigerians, almost every Nigerian, if not every Nigerian, is familiar with the, well, will I say the acronym or with the phrase POS, point of sale operators. But now Nigerians have to turn to these POS operators, even those who have never patronized them before, for cash. But they are complaining bitterly about the exorbitant charges by these POS operators in spite of CBN's warning. Who exactly is to blame here? Should we blame CBN for bringing up this policy initially? Do we blame the commercial banks who are now, according to some, charging these POS operators, higher than the regular rates that they used to charge them before because of the case on ground? Or is it, sheer greed of these POS operators who seem to be taking advantage of Nigeria's situation?
Okay, thank you, Bernard. The response to this cannot be straightforward because the blame is shared by almost everyone. First, the CBN coming up with a brilliant policy at the wrong time is one of the issues that we are contending with. And then there's not much time for people to, exhaust the old cash in their hands. Also realizing that this is still an economy that is cash-based to a large extent. Perhaps the CBN failed to understand the magnitude of or the implication of all of these, in responding to the policy that is being introduced by the CBN. So on one hand, there are some issues that the CBN should have taken note of, but they didn't take note of that, and it added to the problem. Then secondly, is that we've seen, initially there were mere speculations, but after videos emerged of these new notes being packed in the vaults of many commercial banks without being dispensed to the public, it became clear that there is a high level of sabotage on the part of some of those banks, and that added to the pressure in the system and in the society at large. And then the POS operators, they are in business to buy and sell, as it may be. And so when they buy at higher costs, they will sell at higher cost. But the question now is, what is the product being bought
and it turned out to be the same notes that is being sold. It's been it's a mixture of so many things. But one thing is clear, that the citizens, to a large extent, create most of the problem for fellow citizens, from the bank, people that work in the banks. Most times we look at those people in the banking halls as the people that are the problem. No, I do not think so. There are higher authorities that give instructions, that pass instructions to those ones that we see in the banking halls. Those ones are hardly seen, and they are the ones that are causing this whole problem. From their greed to maximize whatever they are making out of it, from their insensitivity to national assignment, from their whatever negative that you want to use to qualify it, and then it begins to cascade down to the man on the street, the POS operators. Unfortunately, those are the ones that we see every day, and those are the ones that people blame for whatever that is going on in the system. So in summary, the blame will be shared across all of these segments, from the CBN to the bank workers, the money banks themselves, and then even to the POS operators. Have you heard that some of the petrol stations do not allow people to pay with cards any longer?
They want people to pay with cash.
Exactly. And when you look across the road, you see the POS operator who they supply that cash to for interest, for a profit. And then the POS operator gives the money back to the people that come to buy petrol. You go and pay the same petrol station, and the cycle of wickedness continue. So the blame cannot be apportioned to one person or one segment. It will be cut across and shared among various areas.
It's a good thing you talked about the petrol sellers, because we're going to come to that later on in the show. But okay, I think.
In the meantime, Uzonna, you mentioned something about the initiative being a brilliant one, and I would just like to ask Tolu. A lot of people have been having debates about whether or not this cashless policy will work in Nigeria, bearing in mind everything that has been happening now. I mean, we've seen online banking services are not favorable to the people, and generally it doesn't look like Nigeria is developed enough to run a cashless policy. It might work for a certain group of people, but for the majority it will not work. So I want to know your opinion about the entire cashless policy thing.
So cashless policy in Nigeria is over a decade old. January 2012, I believe it is, that's when the policy kicked off with pilot schemes in cities like Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt. But there is a literacy aspect to it, but there's also an aspect to it where there's not so much literacy. Because if you're claiming that it's about literacy and it's only for the elite, just go to West Africa, or rather East Africa, I beg your pardon, and look at our neighbor Kenya and see how developed Kenya has become and how entrenched mobile money services like M-Pesa have become in Kenya as well. So you have examples across the continent. But what I think happened here is that even throughout the past decade or so that the cashless policy has been in effect in Nigeria, there hasn't been the kind of pressure that the policy, or basically the system, has felt, like the pressure has felt in the past 2 weeks. So there were many, many opportunities along the road for the CBN and the money deposit banks, as well as those coming into the financial sector, to give us more access to online transactions and mobile money and all of that, to do small stress tests. And many people we've spoken to have talked about the fact that they don't think the CBN really did a stress test on the financial services sector, on the financial system, and even on the backbone that carries the online transactions before this policy, or the policy on redesigning the Naira, and of course that's also the revised cash withdrawal limits. So let's not forget that there are two things in play here. The first thing that came into play was the revised cash withdrawal limits that limited the amount of money that Nigerians could get over the counter and also through the ATMs. So you remember that the first time that the CBN came out with that, there was a lot of uproar. So the CBN amended the amount that could be collected by individuals and corporates over the counter and at the POS and rather ATM. And then you now get into this redesigning Naira of the 200 and the 500 and the 1,000 Naira notes. So there are two things actually at play at the same time. And many point to the fact that it does not seem like the CBN did an adequate stress test on the financial system to see how banks would be able to sufficiently roll out the money, and also how the system itself would take on that deluge. A lot of people have mobile money or online transactions. There's USSD as well. But how many people actually use it? And with that policy that CBN put in place, all of a sudden you had probably 100-fold in terms of usage coming onto a system that has not been tested, that has not been pressurized in the past decade. And in many instances, the system folded. Now, not all banks are having issues. There are some banks, if you go on social media here in Nigeria, you'll see a lot more complaints about certain banks than others. But you saw that it seems those banks who had been making some form of investment into the financial backbone, into the online transactions, seem to fare a little bit better. It's all coming down to pressure. All the pressure came all at once, and we're all feeling it. And I also want to add an aspect to the policy as well. I agree with Uzonna. I do think it's a good policy. Implementation is where many people have now faulted the CBN and the presidency, as well as the banks. There's an issue with, is this a swap? Because many people are of the mind that you would take your money into the bank and you would likely get the same amount of money back. But it's not a one-for-one swap. This was the opportunity that the central bank used to mop up excess liquidity, which they said was also driving, of course, inflation, but also putting too much money out of the banking vault. They didn't know in whose hands it was. It was being hoarded. It wasn't really circulating around the economy as much as it should. It was just in place. So with that issue, of course, they also mentioned the aspect of terrorism financing as well, and one or two other things in terms of why they brought this policy. So the cashless policy has been around for a long time. This is just adding to the pressure that policy is felt. But the cashless policy is a good one. This policy is also a good one, but we remain to see that implementation has been a struggle for Nigeria when it comes to both policies.
Now, Uzonna, this is where I play the lawyer and I say, let's take it to court. Of course, not literally speaking. Now, what's your take on the Supreme Court's ruling on this, on the implication of the Central Bank of Nigeria, that CBN's redesign of the Naira notes and this cashless policy? We know that the court has stepped in right now, but, what's your take on this, and where do you think Nigeria will go with this new court ruling?
Well, the matter before the CBN is between the three state governors, namely Kogi, Kaduna, and Zamfara states. They are the appellants in that matter, or applicants in that matter, and the other party is the federal government. Unfortunately, the CBN, who is responsible for the Naira redesign, is not party in that suit, and it's doubtful to see how the CBN can be can be made to obey a court order that it is not party to. That's number one. Number two is that the people that filed the suit did not join CBN deliberately, because if they had done so, the Supreme Court would have declined jurisdiction, and so the matter would have fallen flat on its face ab initio. And so they technically left CBN out of it. And then it came back to haunt them, because what they seek to achieve may not be achievable. The Attorney General of the Federation, who is the Chief Legal Officer of the federal government, cannot issue orders to the Central Bank of Nigeria. By the status that created the CBN, it's meant to be a separate entity and does not answer to the Attorney General of the Federation. Yes, a lot of people mistake it to say that the CBN is an agency under the federal government. Yes, it is neither here nor there, because it is created by law, by statute, to be independent largely. So when it is carrying out its responsibility of controlling the monetary policy of the country, it does not answer, I use parentheses, it does not answer to anyone. And so we would like to see how this plays out. That's why a lot of people believe that the deadline issued by the CBN, which is the 10th of February, still stands at the moment. Though CBN had not made any official statement, neither has the federal government of Nigeria, through the Attorney General of the Federation, issued a statement to say our hands are tied, or whatever they want to say. So it's a bit loose at the moment, but technically, the CBN does not have any case before the Supreme Court of Nigeria.
All right, thank you so much for that, Uzonna. We still have our guest here with us, and we're still talking about the situation that has left a lot of Nigerians cash-strapped. But before we continue, we have a very few social media reactions to this situation, and we would like to take a look at that and come back for the conversation.
Hi, Blessings. Hi, Bernard. Thank you for having me join you. Well, while the Supreme Court still plays the whistleblower, or let me say the umpire in this case, an interim judgment affecting people involved in the match, which is the federal government and, of course, the CBN, who is not even involved in the match. Anyways, the spectators are meant to bear the brunt, and they've gone to Twitter to really stress and, just vent their displeasure on all the cases that has been happening over time. And from the very, very first tweet here from Frank Cook, it says, I hope that this chaos in the country due to fuel and cash scarcity is not a plan to sabotage the election process to be postponed. And this has been going on for a very long while. However, if the APC have got full confidence of winning this election, I believe that all these catastrophes won't happen. As that's been going on for a while now, this has been like a rumor saying the fuel scarcity and the cash swap crisis has been weaponized to actually target a particular candidate. And here we have Poja Media says, don't be used by any politician for protests. Cash scarcity is affecting everyone, but we can still be calm and not destroy properties or waste our lives. Let's be calm. And I'm sure he's speaking here to the recent protest that has been ongoing across the state where properties have been vandalized. Remember the last time this happened, even anywhere close to Lagos, it was not easy to mop up. And lastly, we have Rally XS saying, been feeling incredibly sad, and being a Nigerian in this time is a major reason for that. It's so sad that there is no day I'm not so close to tears, especially being a young entrepreneur in a country with cash and fuel scarcity. And when you can, and when you even get it, it is at a loss. And this feeling is what most Nigerians are feeling right now. This does not even do justice to what Nigerians are feeling right now on the street. So that's the reaction we can take for this segment.
Thank you so much, Ni. Clearly, social media has gone agog. As at some point, new Naira, new cash, terms and phrases like that was trending on Nigerian social media all across the past 1 week. And of course, not just that, there was a petrol scarcity, which I said, of course, we are going to come to that. But for now, it's the new Naira that has been trending on social media. Thank you once again, Ni, for that.
All right, we still have our guests with us. We have Uzonna, Ononye, and of course, we still have Tolulope, Adeleru-Balogun. And I would still like for us to continue this conversation on the cash trap situation. Now, we understand that most banks are shutting down as a result of the attacks by customers. And I mean, if you look at it literally, it's because of the, inactivities of the banks that made some of the customers attack these banks. So it's like a vicious cycle. Now, what do you think, and this is for Uzonna now, what do you think will be the impact of this on people's daily activities, their businesses, and the economy at large? As some people have said, shutting down only makes people more agitated, and it also makes the matter worse.
As a matter of fact, when people are under pressure, they vent it through many ways. Whether it is justified or not is a different argument entirely. However, the people that work in banks are also human beings who would take steps to protect themselves and preserve their own lives. And when we see violent attacks inside the banking hall, it's natural for those who work in the banks to be agitated and take steps to protect themselves. That may have led to seeing some of the banks, their doors shut down, and they regulate the number of people that will walk into the bank at any given time, perhaps to allow them, give room for them to be able to control the surge. Having said that, for how long this will last is actually what will determine whether it will end this way or go a bit further. We saw videos of protests in Abeokuta yesterday, and some days ago there was a protest in Ibadan, capital of Oyo State, southwest Nigeria, and all of these are pointing to one direction, that there is a limit to how much or how long people can bear with difficulty. Yes, there are thoughts that some of these people that are protesting may not actually be feeling that the situation as bad as is being made to appear. Some people think that some politicians are behind it, instigating it, trying to use it to create more tension in the system, perhaps to force the federal government to bend and allow them have their way. All of these are debates, but the important thing is that the system is tensed and the people are agitated. But how to resolve all of this amicably to avoid further escalation should be what everyone should be thinking about now.
Okay, and Tolu, as we wrap up the conversation, my question for you here now is, there's a clear risk that cash shortages can cause hardship and, well, will eventually cause hardship and frustrations, which could escalate social tensions, especially in a delirious political environment. Now, what's the implication of this ahead of the February 25th presidential and parliamentary elections and the March 11th gubernatorial elections? Already, there are some that are saying that, of course, when the economy is weak, every other sector of the country, I beg your pardon, will be weak, which means that there are some people who are suggesting that the elections may not hold. So, what's the direct implication of this cash issue right now on the forthcoming elections? What do you think?
So for the elections, I think it's the sort of spillover, because don't forget the fuel scarcity. But now we're starting to see in Lagos now that the queues are slightly reducing. They have been reducing in Abuja as well, and hopefully they're reducing elsewhere across the country. We're not just focused on Abuja and Lagos. But you have an impact that's been coming from that. And we saw an increase in transport prices. We saw an increase in food prices as well. And Nigeria already had food inflation that was at historic numbers coming out of 2022. We also saw those numbers increase, of course, because of December. But now people are saying, with this situation, put the fuel on top of it, you're going to say probably consumer spending and consumer demand is going to be very dampened when we get the January numbers. And it's also very likely for the majority of February as well, because it's been a majorly February issue with the cash situation. You're also going to see consumer spending and consumer demand also being dampened. An economy that's had 2 recessions in about 5 years under President Muhammadu Buhari is not an economy that you want to dampen consumer spending. It's not an economy that you want to dampen consumer demand as well. You want to do as much as you can to keep cash circulating around an economy like this, moving from the hands of the butcher, the teacher, into the banks, back out from the banks, even being loaned. You want to keep cash in any way you can, absolutely moving in an economy as dependent on cash as Nigeria is. Don't also forget that beyond the elections, we can all look at this in terms of how it affects the elections, but beyond the elections right now, we're looking at, once again, broken trust or limited trust or reduced trust now in Nigeria's financial system once again. Even though the CBN said one of the issues that they wanted to bring this old notes into the banks for them was because they wanted to address hoarding. But guess what's happening now? People are going to the ATM, and when they're able to get their hands on the new notes, they hoard them. They're not necessarily spending as much as they could. They're going back to the ATMs, going back to the POSs, going back to the banks to get more money to hoard. Because right now, they don't know when next they'll have access. So it's also had a rebound effect on the confidence that many people have in Nigeria's banking system. And that's a rebound effect that you might feel also when it comes to foreign direct investment for this quarter, or even investor confidence in Nigeria for this quarter as well. So it's a question and a conversation that far exceeds the conversation around, of course, the elections as well. And then you also look at the vote buying situation. That was another reason that the CBN gave for redesigning and trying to push through this policy as quickly as possible. They wanted to limit the ability of politicians to vote buy. But that also lets you know that we're not looking at vote buying as more than just a cash transaction. But vote buying is much more than that. It can be by barter. We've seen situations where people are offered recharge cards, they're offered bags of rice, they're offered food, they're offered Indomie. Yes, that's bought with money, but that's not eventually money trading hands on election day. So vote buying is not just about cash, whether it's old notes or new notes, it goes beyond that. And at the end of the day, when you limit people's ability to get access to the money that they worked for, when you show them in a way that they can't give you their money to keep in safekeeping and in your custody and then have access to it when they need, you undo a lot of the hard work that has been done to build confidence and trust in Nigeria's financial system. And you also have many people who wonder whether or not waking up in a policy changes. So if you're a small business, just imagine how this has affected your ability to buy and sell. So if somebody is looking to invest in Nigeria, they might have to consider, what if I wake up tomorrow and they tell me I can't repatriate? And we've seen the situation in foreign airlines and the CBN and their inability to repatriate their money. I can't repatriate money over a certain limit. So there are a lot of concerns as to what this is, and I think it goes really, really beyond.
All right, thank you so much for that, Tolu. Apologies to interrupt, but because of our time, we'll have to go on a short break now. And when we come back, of course, we'll continue the conversation. We're still talking about the twin challenges that Nigeria is faced with currently, and that is the fuel scarcity and, of course, the cash scarcity. Thank you to our guests for being here so far, Uzonna, Ononye, and Tolulope, Adeleru-Balogun. We'll continue the conversation after the break. Do stay with us. Many thanks for staying with us. You're still watching Report Desk Africa, and today we are narrowing down our conversation to the West African country Nigeria and the challenges they're facing currently, which is the fuel scarcity and, of course, cash scarcity. Now, earlier we talked about, the scarcity of cash and how a furtherance of this problem can lead to economic sabotage. Now, we'll be looking at the fuel scarcity, and there seems to be no end in sight to Nigeria's lingering petrol scarcity. Now, I remember that we've talked about this on this show alone for the longest time. The queues at the fuel stations seem to get longer by the day, although, yes, thankfully, some of them are reducing now gradually. And these has caused a traffic gridlock at several locations, even as black market traders take advantage of a situation selling at more than twice the official pump price. Now, with the cash scarcity and challenges of electronic banking, the effect of fuel scarcity seems to bite harder on Nigerians. Now, some people are speculating that this is an attempt at political sabotage, and we don't know that for sure. But if it is, the question is, who do we blame for this? Is it the oil marketers? Is it the opposition parties? Is it the ruling party? We don't know that for sure. But right now we have a package by my colleague here, News Central's Bernard Akede, who helps us understand the current situation of things in the West African country. Do take a look.
For these residents of Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital city, this clearly wasn't the kind of Boxing Day celebration they envisaged. As at Tuesday, December 13th, the House of Representatives called on the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, NNPC, to end the artificial fuel scarcity within the next 1 week to ease the suffering of Nigerians. But sadly, the scarcity has now lingered. Definitely, the fuel scarcity has lingered on from last year, October, up into the Yuletide period, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, down through January and into February as well. Like our guest earlier did mention, the queues may have been reducing in Lagos and some parts of Abuja, but news filtering in from other parts of the country has it that the queues are still as long as the eyes can see. And still in the studio with us to discuss this News Central's head of programs, talking about Tolulope, Adeleru-Balogun, and of course, my Oga at the top, our head of news, Uzonna, Ononye. Thank you guys for still staying with us.
I thought maybe...
Thank you for having us. Thank you for staying with us. I beg your pardon. Now we're going to go straight into the petrol scarcity issue that we're having, and well, unfortunately, there has been a relationship between the fuel scarcity and the cash scarcity. A quick joke, which of course is not funny. I did see at some point some people queuing up in front of an ATM machine to get cash, only to join the next queue to buy petrol. And that's how bad it has been in parts of Lagos and other parts of the country. Now, the fuel crisis this time is quite different because it's lasted, like I mentioned earlier, since October 2022. And now we are getting to mid-February 2023. Now, this seems to have lasted longer than any other fuel crisis that the country has seen so far in recent times. How has this, this crisis really affected people? But I'm going to ask personal questions now, and I'll start with you, Uzonna. For me, I know I have a permanent 25 liters gallon in the trunk of my car. How has this affected you lately?
Gallon. Mine is black. So we are in it together. It's been quite tough, to fuel your car. And then when the public power authorities decide to do their thing the normal way, you still have to fuel the generator at home so you'll be able to sleep at night. So it's not a funny period now, but we keep finding a way around it to keep body and soul together.
Mm-hmm. Now, Tolu, is your situation any different?
No, my situation is not any different. Luckily, haven't had to particularly queue for long. When the president was in Lagos, a lot of people almost took it like a public holiday, so I was able to get in and out. And then if you're Nigerian, you just have a plug. So I know many of us have plugs at various filling stations, and you pay them a little bit over whatever it is they're asking to be able to get them to help you out. And that's just the situation. The people I really feel for the most in the past 1 year are small businesses in Nigeria. I can't emphasize that enough. We had the Naira to dollar foreign exchange situation that many of them face. And while we remember this fuel scarcity starting in October, let's not forget that we had a similar situation about mid-year in the second quarter of 2022 as well. That one lasted a few weeks, primarily Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt felt that. But let's also not forget, Abuja had been feeling this fuel scarcity for a large part of 2022 before it really spread to other cities last year. So small businesses have faced the Naira to dollar foreign exchange situation, and many of them bring in goods because, unfortunately, while we're a cash dependent economy, we're also a import economy as well. Then you have to deal with getting fuel, and that fuel, particularly for many businesses, is petrol, PMS, and that's what they use for their generator. When PHCN, and that's the power holding company of Nigeria, fails to provide electricity, now add to it a cash shortage and an inability to even make transfers. And so really my heart sincerely has been going out to small businesses, which are the backbone of Nigeria's economy. We have not done well by them at all.
Definitely. They definitely have been suffering a lot of it. And, still talking about the prices in petrol, let's look at the disparity. Now, the prices have skyrocketed, no doubt, and some fuel stations sell as high as 350 Naira per litre or 400 Naira. And if you even look at some states, like Kogi State, for example, Lokoja, some people are buying at 550 Naira per litre, which is just, ridiculous. And to add to that, some people cannot pay because the online banking services don't work and they can't get cash. So it's a really devastating situation. But Uzonna, if you look at this situation right now, you would wonder where exactly is the body that is supposed to regulate the petrol pump price, at this moment? What are they doing about it?
That's actually where the problem lies, regulating petrol pump price, because you'll be regulating a product you don't have control over the market price. We rely largely on imported products to supply local needs, and then the authorities, so to say, is busy here determining how much it will be sold when they cannot determine how much the people that are importing it will buy them. That's where the subsidy plays a part. But remember that the government has been crying for a long time now that it cannot continue, it cannot sustain the subsidy requirement for Nigeria, for the country. And so it is possible that the federal government can no longer meet up with that subsidy requirement, and then the people that are importing the product cannot buy it. Remember that the Naira-dollar disparity created its own problem too. They cannot buy at a certain price and be forced to sell at another price. So that also is a contributory factor to the entire situation. But I think, personally, that we would have been over with this if government has sustained its campaign from 2012 when it started to talk about removal of subsidy. If it had continued to provide those stopgaps, those things that they needed to do that will make the effect of higher cost of petrol less impactful on the citizens. But the whole thing was swallowed in politics, and government abandoned it. By 2015, a new government came in that said earlier they are not sure that there's anything like subsidy. By the time they got into power in 2015, they began to pay more for subsidy. And that made the situation worse than it was originally. So if we had sustained that effort to remove subsidy from 2012, perhaps before 2015, it would have been a done deal. And now we'll begin to adjust to the realities of buying petrol at a higher cost. But remember that when we buy at a higher cost and it encourages refineries across Nigeria to be established, it will bring down the price eventually. This is a debate that is out there among experts. Some believe that it will not happen, that once we remove subsidy, everybody will jump into importation because it will be faster to recoup their funds. But others believe that the country Nigeria as a country will have a responsibility of providing a cushioning effect, which will also be part of, which will include establishment or authorizing the establishment of refineries locally that would provide a product locally. So it's quite a big challenge. And the person you will pity most is whoever that will win the next election, because the person will have a lot to deal with.
the person will certainly have a lot to deal with. Now, cash scarcity and petrol scarcity are two conversations that have been going on and offline. And now we're going to go out, to the online space to see what Nigerians have been saying. And of course, our correspondent, Niyo Money, is still standing by to tell us what people have been saying, particularly Nigerians, concerning the petrol scarcity issue. Over to you, Niyi.
Well, Bernard, unlike Tolu, who has a fuel plug, not many people have a fuel plug, no stock of a socket or extension box. But they try to do what they can to get fuel and, of course, to get cash and try to survive these current situation they are going through. The internet has been washed with a lot of comments, and we have one here from Rita Rock 18. It says the cash and fuel scarcity has all been a means to sabotage one man, though. Wonder why the North and Kaaba would go to that much extent to stop a man from becoming the president, to be honest. And here, this, as I said earlier, this has been some of the arguments and some of the debates and, of course, memo and information on the street. And here we have Egbaz, who says some folks support the CBN cash swap deadline because they say it is targeted at vote buying. Who knows? However, these politicians have new Naira notes delivered to their homes by the banks and can purchase new Naira across the counter whenever they desire. And we've seen indications of some of these, even as the ICPC raids banks and the EFCC also in support raided some bank and got some new cash. Who knows how true this is because it's still been verified. And lastly, we have Mr. Macaroni, who is a public figure, of course, in Nigeria, says instead of campaigning, APC should be begging and asking for forgiveness from Nigerians every morning, afternoon, and night for the hardship and suffering that has come with this fuel scarcity alone. This is wickedness. Well, wickedness, as you said, Uzo mentioned it earlier, this has become a cycle of wickedness. Hopefully, this wickedness ends soon and Nigeria can enjoy the dividend of democracy.
Yeah, I think you should liaise with Tolu and get her plug, seeing as you are the only Nigerian who doesn't have a plug in the fuel station.
Don't sleep on it. All right, thank you so much, Niyi, for that. We're still back at our conversation, and I'll just like to ask this final question because of our time. Tolu, I mentioned earlier that a lot of people have been speculating that this is an attempt at political sabotage, looking at the fact that the elections are forthcoming. Do you think that this will have any effect on the elections if it lingers?
Well, it's really difficult to tell because most political scientists will tell you that when people are frustrated and they're upset with the status quo, with what is happening with those in power, that's when they turn out for elections. That is usually the people who are angry with how things are going that turn up for elections and sometimes can swing elections. It's really quite difficult to tell. We've heard from INEC in terms of security and the fuel scarcity. They're liaising with a few transport associations across Nigeria to ensure the distribution of materials and personnel. But it's a play that can either dampen the move or can give people, voters, more impetus to come out, because people will be asking you to look at your life in the past 5, in the past even 2 weeks, if we're just looking at the Naira shortage. How good has your life been? Let's not forget that President Buhari asked Nigerians to give him 7 days last week to resolve this issue. The 7 days, he spoke, I think, on February the 3rd, and 7 days should wrap up tomorrow, which is also the quote-unquote the CBN deadline, as it may be. So people would ask people to consider, how has your life been? This fuel scarcity, what has the government done? It's also something we need to remark and remember that the president has served as the Minister of Petroleum Resources in his administration. Yes, he's had ministers of state, but for the most part, he supposedly has borne the title of Minister of Petroleum. And we have not heard from him on these issues. We've spoken to Ipman, we've spoken to the depot owners, and they lament the fact that they cannot simply sell and make a profit, not necessarily a large profit, but even any profit based on the price that the NNPC Limited wants them to sell out. It is unsustainable business. And if they continue to do that, then many of them will shut down. So if they shut down and we reduce the amount of fuel, even though our consumption numbers are being questioned, we find ourselves right back here. So this may just be the thing, the 2 issues, the 3 issues with the cash, with the Naira dollar situation that's still in many people's minds from last year, that actually galvanize voters to come out and say, I don't want it like this. I think it could better handled by another party. Okay, let's cut the party some slack, and they did try. So it really is going to be very, very difficult to tell. We've looked at some of the polls, and the issues mainly are, of course, the economy, security, and jobs. But these particular situations right now, how much will they push people out or keep people home? It's going to be after the elections before we probably can tell.
All right, thank you so much, Tolu, Adeleru-Balogun. And before we go, we'll get our final words from you, Uzonna. 30 seconds. What do you think about the forthcoming elections? Do you think INEC will find a way to ensure that this fuel crisis does not affect the election process? Do you think that Nigerians will still come out despite the fuel crisis?
It's difficult to give a yes or no answer to this. INEC does not have responsibility of distributing petrol, but if it has foresight, it would have made arrangements across all the states of the Federation on petrol supply, because they're arranging on how to move materials from point A to point B. So having petrol available should also be part of that plan. And so if they fail to do that, it's going to be a challenge. On the part of the electorate, just like Tolu said, it will spur some people to come out, and it will dampen the morale of some others. But what is clear is that vote buying will not be as free, as easy as it used to be. You know, like in previous elections, because politicians have access to the notes, but they don't have enough because of the restrictions already there. So they may not have enough to buy. However, the people that would have sold their vote for 5,000 will accept 2,000 now, because there's no cash anywhere. So we have a lot to think about.
All right. Thank you so much, Uzonna. Thank you so much, Tolu. That was a lovely way to end. But in my own case, I will end by saying I'll be visiting your desks for cash, because I am also cash strapped.
And the fuel plug as well, Tolu.
That's the good one.
I'll see you.
Thank you so much, Tolu, and thank you, Uzonna, for joining us.